Alright then, something different. So, I've been taking quite a bit of time to basically show off a lot of the Command Conquer Remastered collection, going through all the missions that I didn't show you guys from, a decade ago. And, well, I do enjoy this game quite a bit, as I basically already noted, so I felt that, I want to basically cover a little bit more. And I figured the best way of basically covering it would be some tier lists. This basically goes over all the missions basically that are part of Command & Conquer, both for the original Tiberian Dawn campaigns as well as the later Red Alert and all the expansions too. And as you can basically summarize from the title, we're going to jump into CNC Tiberian Dawn GDI Campaign, and I'll make a tier list out of it. So this is basically one I basically made myself. And, well, let's just get to it then, shall we? Let's have a little bit of music in the background here. And here we go. And apparently I got one basically on the list here. I don't know why I did that, but okay. Alright, so the GDI campaign is basically comprised of roughly I think it was 24 or 25 missions. I'll note, by the way, that this basically also includes basically some of the repeated missions and stuff like that. I'll note, for example, basically when I basically made this list, I combined GDI's 5A and 5AW because they're basically the same mission. And I also went and combined GDI's 13A and B because, again, they're the same mission. So, it's a little bit condensed for this list, but that's probably a good thing, just to throw it out there. Alright, let's get to it. So, starting off with this list, we have GDI 1, X16, Y42. The very first mission in the GDI campaign, and also the one that basically first appeared in the demo. How do I rank it? So, I'll note that the first mission for a GDI is basically a very simple, just get your MCV on a beach, deploy it, build a couple buildings, get some troops out, and then hunt down all of the NOD forces in the area. It's nothing too special, nothing too hard, and, it's basically fine to sort of get your feet wet. I don't think it's basically anything snazzy, of course, because it's not really trying to do anything special. It's just trying to teach a new player how to basically play the game without a tutorial or anything like that. So that's all it really is. I think I'll just give GDI 1 an Admiral rank because it does do just that. It basically teaches you the game, and I believe that tutorial missions should be acknowledged basically for that purpose. I think they did a good enough job for it. Alright. GDI 2, knock out that refinery. The following mission that basically comes after GDI 1 has you basically taking on a role of a damaged base that's been pushed, had not pushing it back on it. And you basically need to push back and wipe out the NOD base in the area that has a refinery in it. Now, what's very interesting about GDI 2 is that you basically have a limited amount of funds, and you're basically given a couple of engineers you can basically use to acquire the NOD refinery and get basically up and running that way. I don't think you really need to. You could possibly just go off send a bunch of infantry to knock out everything, but it's a nice little mission to sort of teach you that there's basically engineers in this game that can use to capture enemy buildings or repair your own. So, it's basically a very simple mission, but again, it's an Admiral mission basically to teach you the basics of the game. So, I'll throw it into B again. Moving on to the third mission, Air Supremacy. So, Air Supremacy is the first mission where we get introduced to the Warthogs for GDI's campaign. We have to knock out the SAM sites in order to get them, and we basically have access to the Grenadier to basically do so. Well, not basically access to the Rocketeers. Now, I think for most part that at this point we're basically sort of outside tutorial territory for missions, but in many ways, like, this is like an mission to sort of like, teach you basically about like, power-ups and stuff like that. And unlike basically the past two missions, you actually have a proper base building like, going on here. So we're actually like, harvesting as well and stuff like that. I think this deserves basically another like, B rank, so let's just throw right here. Alright, so getting on to like, mission 4 and 5 is basically where we have stolen property, reinforced BLS stock, and then we have like, restoring power and like the other stuff. This is basically where like there's always like little arrows going everywhere and anywhere in the GDI campaign for a little bit. So first things first, we have GDI A, 4A, stolen property, Belarus, and right after that we have like GDI 4AW, stolen property, Poland. And then there's also like the other one, GDI 4BW, reinforced BL stock. I'll note that like stolen property, it's a very interesting mission because you're basically using like a small GDI commando team to basically get like through like non-controlled territory and basically like get over to the crate. You might think that's like a fairly simple mission, this one right here, because all you have to do in this mission is just get to the crate and you win. But it is actually like again like a fairly good tutorial sort of mission because this one basically teaches you about like using APCs. And like avoiding like Tiberian for troops. Also like you also deal with the fact there's also gonna be a light tank. Well, you basically don't have like any real anti-armor abilities basically used yet, and like how you basically like deal with it. In many ways, this is basically gonna be another like admiral rank for the most part these missions. So again, let's just throw them basically in the admiral rank for now. And I'm not, by the way, at some point I'll probably go through these and like organize like what rank basically I like consider like the best and like worst, like stuff like that. So like you might see me like put like 1 down here, like 4 over here and stuff like that. But for now, let's just keep it simple. We're just gonna like just throw them in like this, and then I'll get to that later. And by the way, I'll note that basically the two missions here, they don't really have a whole lot of difference to them. So we're not gonna like really different between the two. They're basically just like one goes like to the south in the map, one goes to the north in the map. They both have life tanks basically deal with, etc. So whatever. Reinforced BLA stock. Alright, so I'll note that reinforced BLA stock is kind of important because it basically plays into a narrative for GDI where not basically attacks like BLA stock or like they try to like wipe it out and like your GDI basically like defends it or not. But they basically have like their like cameraman basically like send over images that like GDI attack this nod does, and of course that basically like plays into like the missions down the road. In many ways, reinforced BLA stock, if you basically like look at the like thematic components, it's very important. But the mission itself is like not that great, I find. It's basically just like hunt down the nod troops and like stop them from like destroying a village. So it's kind of meh. I think that'll be the first one I'll always put in a mediocre like C rank here, so let's just put it right there. Alright then, so restoring power. Restoring power is basically the first missions that basically come after Nod's like done their propaganda bit and like GDI's funding has been cut. And each of these missions basically they correspond to like a different sort of like setup where you basically have to go and find like this damaged GDI base, get back online, and then wipe out the Nod forces in the area. I'll note that basically for GDI 5A, that's basically the one that's basically you basically go to the south, and like Nod's basically got their like stuff basically in the northwest. You've got your stuff in like the southwest, and you have to like figure out how to basically like deal with their stuff. Nod's like got SAM sites basically outside their base which you can reach if you want. So you can like sort of like destroy like the SAM sites to get Warhogs basically help you out, or you can just like this send like a giant force of like stuff once you get the chance to wipe out their forces as well. So I find that generally GDIA and like 5AW, this is actually like the first finish I consider to be an excellent rank. So let's just throw right there. I like the idea basically like where you basically have to like work with like with what you got, because that's actually something like I think the GDI missions did really well. Basically, you don't have a construction yard for this one. You do have a base, but you have to basically like manage what you basically have here to the utmost like best you can in order like to win. So it's fairly well done. All right, getting to GDI 5B. GDI 5B is basically the lone like restoring power mission where you basically have a comm center, and that's like an interesting way of like giving you sort of like an advantage basically over like the non-forces. Basically, the other ones don't have comm centers, so you're basically like sort of like looking around, just trying to figure out like where stuff basically is. But this one like makes it a little bit easier for you. The non-base isn't all like that snazzy or anything like that, but they do have quite a few like light tanks and other stuff basically around to basically like work with or like deal with. And you have to, a lot of like other stuff to think, to figure out. The only thing I really don't like about like 5B is that it's basically very like constrained like play area. Just to throw that out there as well. Not only I basically attack you two ways, but the constraint like issue is basically an issue for me. So this will be like one of the first instances where like it's like the same type of mission, but I'm actually gonna throw basically this one I think down to like mediocre or admirable, I wonder. I figure for a mediocre. This is for like how different these missions basically look to each other, but it's fine. I mean, I like how like 5A and 5AW basically were, but 5B is like just like I think we've been better about the comm centers to sort of like add to that. Although notice, well, you can also like try and attack the stamp sites on that one, but it's a little more difficult to do. So yeah, there's like some issues with this one, so it's mediocre. And then we have like GDI's like other like restoring power mission in Germany East. That one doesn't have like a comm center, but it's just like sort of like I didn't think it was like all that like basically like different from the other ones, but I think compared to like the other ones, I find it like to be sort of like in the middle of them. It's not like as like it basically is just like 5A and 5AW, and that you don't have a comm center, and like you basically do stuff, but it's just like sort of like boring, I find, for a mission. Because basically it's very easy to sort of like force the attacks to basically come towards you, and also other stuff. So yeah, let's just throw that in admirable. All right, GDI 6 Havoc, and I'm a CNC Renegade, but oh well. GDI 6 Havoc is basically the second mission to appear in like the GDI's demo, and it's a very like interesting like mission where you basically have like one unit to basically work with the entire time, for the most part. The idea is basically have to take that commando like up to an base, basically blow their airstrip up, or at least one of the buildings. If you remember, like when I basically played it back in the day, I basically blew up the like Tiberian refinery so that he couldn't like produce anything in not base. That was fun. All right, so that mission is basically like how can I put it? It's a very interesting like commando like esque mission, and I think it's like one of the better ones. But it's also like what can I say about it? Like you walk into like your base, you blow up turrets, you blow up like SAM sites. You have to basically figure out how to manage like your like guy. Remember that this is also back before like C4 when it blows up buildings. The guys can still pop out of the building to like kill you. So I have to say like that basically like brings it down a little bit for me, but I still think like Hack's a fairly excellent mission. So I think it's a fairly good command mission. So let's just throw basically up to excellent and be done with it. Alright, GDI 7, destroy the airstrip. So, I'm not basically, if you basically, as I basically said, don't blow up like the airstrip and blow up something else in the not base, you'll get GDI 7 destroy the airstrip. And that basically is a very, like, simple mission where you basically, like, crush the, like, not base. You basically know, like, half the map already because you basically have already been, like, through half the map. But it's also a very boring mission at the same time as well because all you're doing is just, like, cleaning up after yourself for the most part. Now, on that by the way as well, GDI 7 is also a good example of a mission that basically is like a carryover from like one mission to the next, because basically the building that's blown up will be blown up unless they like rebuild it, which they probably could. What to say about it? I think that it's a fairly interesting idea, the map, but because of like how like Havoc is like developed like in Mission 6. There's like a lot of like lacking space that like isn't really like used. They do like make use of quite a bit of space as well. I'll say it's admirable, but that's basically a very weak admiral for sure. Just throw it out there. All right, so GDI AA UN sanctions. So GDI AA is basically another one of those missions where you're basically like working with like a damaged base, and you have to basically fort like the non-UN space in like the vicinity in their base, and they have like a full base to work with. It does have an interesting like little tidbit though about it, because you have like access to the mobile rocket launcher systems, and those things are pretty damn powerful to like basically like damage stuff from afar. And it's like one of the missions where you can actually like bomb like the not base basically with like MRLS if you basically want to, just like knock out their buildings basically from afar. What to say about it? It's also a mission where like not our artillery can basically come around to like the back of your base and like do stuff like that. So your base has a weak point basically to it. I think I'll say this is like another one of those excellent missions, because it's actually like very fun basically to play this mission, because you're actually like having to like figure out like how you're gonna deal with this not base that like is well fortified for the most part, though it does have like these like overlooking like regions you can basically attack from. So yeah, it's an excellent mission basically to play with. So I'll throw it up there. And then there's GDI 8B, Dr. Mobius, the Haiti mission. And yes, even these decades later, it's still a Haiti mission. At best, it's deficient. But is it terrible? Yeah, I'm going to say this is the first terrible mission. So, to talk a little about like Dr. Mobius's like first mission here with the hospital and stuff. The thing about this mission is that it really sucks when you basically play it too long and have civilians basically kill themselves on the Tiberian. And you have to basically deal with like not attacking it like from like helicopters and other stuff, basically trying to like kill civilians as well. Now there's like ways basically around this mission that like you might know of like later on, but this is basically one of those missions that I really didn't like basically back in the day, and I still really don't like right now. So I have to basically rank it as like terrible, because I really didn't think much of this mission. It might have been better if like the civilians didn't like wander into the Tiberian as much, or if it's basically some way of like mitigating like their like issues and stuff like that, like sandbagging them. But that takes time and money, and it's not that easy to do. So yeah, basically let's throw this into like terrible and be done with it. And then we move on to GDI 9, Clearing the Path, the one where we get introduced to the Obelisk of Light. We see how powerful it is. It basically blows up the like gunboats. And if you try and attack it directly, it basically like blows up your units as well. And the mission is like very important, because it also teaches you that like one of the best ways to basically deal with an obelisk is basically to go through like a weak point of a base and attack them from there. What to say about this mission? I do think I like found this mission to be kind of interesting, but is it like great or anything like that? Whereas this is admirable, I guess. Because I'm tempted to say that like GDI 9 is basically admirable and nothing really better than that. It basically teaches you about like the Obelisk of Light and like how dangerously like frightening it is, but well, you know what? At this point, let's just throw this down to mediocre. The thing about like GDI 9, the one major problem I basically have it is the fact that you're not really getting attacked by like NAS vehicles all that much in this one. It really feels like you should be like feeling against like a full like NAV force for the most part, but their forces are basically like very limited for the most part in this one, so that's like sort of like a strike against them, I think, at this point. So yeah, let's just throw this like down into like mediocre and be like happy where it is right there. All right then. GDI 10A is basically the third and last like mission that basically appears in the demo. The difference between like the demo mission and like the main game is the fact that you basically don't get the amount of tanks basically in like the main game as you did in the demo. But that's basically a very like minor thing. Basically, you don't have access to like the firepower to basically have for the most part, but it's still a very good mission. And you do get access to the orcas basically to work with, which is very fun. I don't know why it's not moving, but okay. Oh, there we go. Alright, so. I know it's going to be an excellent mission, because there's basically a lot going on, like, you know, in GDI 10A. You basically deal with, like, you know, units basically coming to attack you. They'll basically come up, the rigs basically to attack your stuff from, like, you know, overrigs, like you basically saw in, like, you know, GDI 8, for example, when you did it to them. You know what? You know what? It's good right there. I'm gonna say that, like, you know, orchestration, in you know, Slovenia is basically a very, like, you know, excellent mission. Just for a simple fact that I think they could have been a little bit better if they basically had more, like, you know, vehicles basically coming at you in this mission. But for what it basically offers you at this point with, like, the orcas and stuff like that, it's basically a fun mission to sort of, like, you know, just play around with. So yeah, I'll call it excellent. Be done with it. I won't have our call like 10B basically excellent, however. So let's throw it right here. The thing about GDI 10B is that the pathway that, like, you know, Naka basically takes to, like, the back of your base is basically, like, you know, behind their base, so it's basically protected from, like, you know, you basically sending units basically to, like, defend against it. And that makes it a little bit annoying for the most part. Actually, you know what? I'm going to say it's mediocre. Because it's, like, you know, it's a very, like, you know, annoying mission also as well, because there's not a whole lot of ways to, like, you know, approach the not base, because there's basically a lot of, like, space basically devoid of, like, you know, traversed by units. There's basically a giant lake basically blocking you off. There's, like, only a couple of routes of, like, you know, turrets all the way up, like, you know, their mission, but it's basically the mission is, like, you know, very inaccessible, and that's, like, you know, the big, like, you know, drawback against it. So let's just throw a mediocre me down it right there, I think. Alright, codename Delphi. So codename Delphi basically has you, like, you know, dropping onto, like, the beach of, like, the Grenadiers, which have to be, like, used to, like, you know, go through, like, the turrets and, like, you know, all the other stuff basically on this map. You eventually have to deal with, like, you know, what can I say about it? I mean, flame tanks basically appearing as, like, this mission this time around. And although this is basically a mission that's, like, you know, yeah, basically, like, you know, get and, like, find, like, ancient Delphi and, like, get it out of there, but for the most part, this is, like, a mission that, you know, it's basically, like, you know, where you basically get to throw, like, you know, your forces basically at the enemy's forces basically for most part. What to say about it? You know, at this point, codename Delphi basically feels like sort of like, you know, it's basically a mission that's basically sort of like, you know, it could be better. I feel like, you know, you could have, like, you know, not basically being a little more aggressive basically in this one. They're basically, like, you know, they do come and attack you quite a bit, but at the same time, the stuff they send you, like, they do send, like, flame tanks at you. But it's just sort of like a lacking mission for the most part, so yeah, let's just throw it into, like, you know, mediocre. Right then, so Dr. Mois again. So I'm not that basically GDI 12A and 12B, they're very similar in that, like, you know, you basically have to, like, you know, manage a force of units and deal with, like, the, like, you know, SAM sites around your base. Now, something I didn't like know, basically, like, you know, before, like, you know, reading about it basically in remastered, like, games and stuff like that and guides for it. But apparently the not base basically starts depowered in, like, you know, these missions basically here, which is very interesting. Basically, the SAM sites they have, they, like, don't require power to, like, fire aircraft, so they can just fire whenever they want to. And they actually have, like, a number of, like, you know, SAM sites basically around the map, right? That basically draw, like, the non-base's power. So they actually start like depowered in this mission, like the, like, you know, enemy's base. And one of them basically, I believe it's, like, you know, the second one, it's actually, like, you know, useful to, like, you know, go and attack the, like, enemy's base before you start attacking the, like, you know, SAM sites. It can, like, lead to, like, very laughable, like, ideas and stuff like that. Though at the same time, like, you know, you're probably not gonna, like, know about that, or at least you wouldn't know it back then. I think for the most part, I consider 12A and 12B to be, like, you know, a couple, like, mediocre missions at this point. I do like the idea of, like, you know, having, like, a limited fund space and manage stuff, but it's very much a mission of, like, you know, how can I say, just like, manage like a small force of like, it's basically while like not like, constantly attacks you, keeps you on the back foot. We've already basically sort of like seen this with like, the second mission basically like, employ it with us, right? So this makes us like the not base is like a little bit more of a threat, I guess. But still, like, these missions are sort of boring, I think, as well. Yes, this is called mediocre. Alright, so, GDI 13, Iron Can Strike, in the former country known as Yugoslavia. So, I'll note that Iron Can Strike basically has, like, the first instance where there's, like, 2 bases to basically deal with. You also get access to, like, the MF tanks, as well as, like, the Iron Cannon, and the mobile rocket launchers, you can actually build them now. Would I call this, like, a fantastic mission? The first one of its kind, I think. And the answer is, I think, yes. So, I've always found that GDI 13 is basically sort of like the mission where you basically like get like the full tech tree of like GDI, and you're basically being here to sort of like, be taught basically how to like, use like all your stuff here, right? So, this is basically like a precursor mission to like the last one, and it does a really good job basically like, giving you like time to basically like, deal with like multiple bases, deal with like, all the different like, aspects of like the GDI arsenal. Yeah, I found this like an excellent mission, so let's just throw it up there, I think. GDI 14, Fish in a Barrel. What to say about GDI Fish in a Barrel? I actually think that like it's a very interesting idea, basically like, intercepting a not force. It's a very short mission, but it's fairly sweet, so I wouldn't call it fantastic, but it is excellent. Let's just throw it right there. Alright, so now we get on to like, the triple trifecta of like, endgame, so to speak, for the GDI here. Temple Strike Sarajevo West, Sarajevo East, and Sarajevo Center. Now, I'll note that Sarajevo, West there, 15A. I always found that mission to be like, how can I say this? I actually like, played this mission for like the first time basically, in like the like, remaster like, missions, like, re-update I guess of it, and basically the thing about this mission, there's basically not base, like this one giant not base for you to fight with. So basically like, 2 like aspects to it, like they're on like a sort of like not territorial sort of ridge, and what to say about this mission? I really don't think much of like, 15A. That's all I can really say about it. Deficient. Alright, let's just talk a little about like, why I find this mission deficient. So, another thing I found like very like, lackluster about like 15A is that it basically was a mission where you could easily just like, go around to like, the east of the map, go right down to like the Tiberian styles and capture them if you want to for money. You can also like, snake your way basically over to like, the bottom like, southwest of the map, basically to capture a construction yard very easily without like much like issue. Unlike basically the other 2 maps, which basically have like, a little bit more protection for their like, lone construction yard basically out in nowhere. The other thing I'm basically note about like, the GDI's like, endgames basically, by the way. The thing about their missions is that like, B and C, they're actually designed so that you can actually like imagine like, you're attacking like, from like the south basically like, B, and you're basically gonna basically like, see basically like, C here. I just want to basically try and like, find some maps here just to show you off. So GDI, let's just see if it has like, the survey of missions here, because that'd be awesome to find. And it does not. Okay, so Tiberian done. Walkthrough. GDI mission 15. So I just want to basically sort of like, show us off, but this should be it. So this is like, one of the guys basically used like, looking through some of the stuff for like, getting the hard difficulties and stuff like that out of the way. So here's basically like, mission 15A, by the way, the northwestern route. And the thing about this map here is like, this is sort of like throw it out here. Basically, how it basically works is like you actually like send like your guys down here to like the sort of like east, and from here you can basically like take out like this like silo right here very easily to like get money for your like aspects. And you can also like sneak your way basically into like the like this part of the map over here if you want to just sort of like get down to like their like base over here if you want. And as you can basically see, like no defense and stuff like these like turrets over here really for most parts, so it's like it feels like this was like a it's well designed as the other two maps, which are basically like down here. So this is basically like mission B, and it basically it's like the one I basically played back in the day where you basically have like you're managing to see that basically drive onto like this little area here. There's like a a little bit of defensive picks all over here basically and stuff like that. Now eventually you'll know by the way something about this mission. There's basically a Tiberian field that's gonna be like over here, and eventually like they're build structures here when they basically like like that basically like, gets down. Those structures don't actually start there, but they like they pop up as soon as like you clear the Tiberian field there a little bit. Now, to figure out this map here, 15B, I actually want to note that 15B is basically a map that I do consider like fantastic. So let's throw it right here. Something about like 15B here, by the way, is that like it's basically a gauntlet. So you have to go through like this base first here before you can like move on to like this next base up here. And even though like their Tiberian styles are sort of like very accessible up here, there's basically an obstacle light basically sort of guiding away basically up here, so it's not that easy to get up to here. Plus, for a simple fact that like this like construction is sort of like defended by like this like guy as well. It's basically like not as easy to like it's like cheese this mission like the other one. But what I really like about this mission and the other one that basically follows here, 15C, note basically how the aspects of like you basically have like these tip styles right here. You have like this base right here. You have like the the mountain drop and like the river like going right here and all this stuff. The discussion right over here. If you basically come down and look at like 15C here, by the way. Note that this basically sort of like carries on to basically sort of like this have like this sort of like dynamic effect where here's like there's like the base right here again with like the river and stuff like that. There's their base again and the Tiberian silos. There's their construction yard base again over here. And basically like this like sort of like this is like the top half of like the other mission basically here. And that's what I basically always liked about like mission like 15C and like 15B. It actually like felt like you're like attacking it from the top, which basically has like a fairly like high amount of like not pressure on it, or at the bottom, which basically has high pressure and stuff like that. Now, note this is very interesting in this mission because they're basically like a comm center and stuff like that. You can actually capture it away, which you can. But basically have like this like sort of like field where you can basically work with if you want to. So, unlike basically for the army mission, you actually have like your own like field in this mission, like a Tiberian field basically work with in this one. Though you have to basically move fast because unlike with like this one here, where you have like quite actually, you actually have quite a bit of Tiberian to work with in this map here. Once you basically go through this Tiberian right here, there's really not a whole lot you can basically work with, on the rest of the map here. So this map actually has like very constrained like what you can basically do. Now I will note by the way, this is a very interesting like map as well because you can actually send like your troops down here to like sort of void this guy's base up here, and you can actually like go down to like either like attack like the nod like Temple Nod over here. Or eventually you can like go over and like capture this like tip styles and like construction yard if you basically go through this like opposite over here, right? So this is a very like sort of like interesting map. And you know what? Honestly, I'm gonna say this right now. This is also a fantastic map. So we'll put it right there. All right, so here's basically like my sort of like ranking basically for like the missions in like the GDI campaign. And I'm actually kind of surprised basically it ranks like some of them like as like admiral and mediocre, but not really as well, but whatever. So here's a question: how do you basically like rate these missions yourself? I guess. Would you rate them the same as me? I guess. And I also save and download my list here. So title and tier of like the tier list. So DFuxa plays GDI campaign ranking. Let's just save this.